My name's David, and the chronological Bible reading for June 26th is 1 Kings chapter 15, beginning in verse 25 through the end of chapter 16, and 2 Chronicles chapter 17. We are now seeing the rapid de-escalation of God's chosen nation splintering off into multiple factions, chaos ensuing as the people get further and further away from God's plan for their lives. You'll remember all the way back in 1 Samuel chapter 8 when the prophet Samuel tried to reason with the people and say, you don't want a king like the other nations. He'll amass riches and horses and soldiers for himself. He'll take your sons and your daughters. He will excise taxes on you. He will not take care of you. He will take care of himself. And now, in just a few generations, it's getting worse and worse, and the reigns of the kings are becoming shorter and shorter. And repeatedly, we're seeing when a new king attains the throne, he's wiping out the entire family of his predecessor. Each and every time, it's because of the sin. And not only are the kings sinful, but they lead the people in sin. Jeroboam's son Nadab takes the throne, and he sins. He walks in the sin of his father. And it says in verse 26, he caused the people of Israel to sin. He's only king for a year or two, and then Baasha comes, conspires against him, kills him and his household. And verse 30 says it's because of the sin of Jeroboam, how he had not only sinned himself, but he caused Israel to sin. In verse 34, Baasha takes the throne, but he causes Israel to commit sin. And we see this word because used over and over again. Because of what you've done, this is what's going to happen. There's always a cause and effect with God. We choose how we are going to act, and God warns us ahead of time. He's given us a conscience, and he's also given us his word, and we know right from wrong. Every one of us, we're born with it. We know what is right. We know what is wrong. We know that it's best to love other people rather than putting our own needs and desires first. When Paul writes in Romans that the creation testifies against mankind, it's because we can look around and see by the rising and the setting of the sun that there must be a creator that's over all of it. But also in the way that humans interact, we know it's wrong to steal. We know it is wrong to bear false witness against other people. It's common sense. And these people got further and further and further away from the God who created them because they rejected morality. They created a new narrative. And we see the same thing happening in the church today, splintering off, where people want to live a specific lifestyle and they don't like what's being taught in one church, so they just go and start their own church that will affirm their lifestyle and tell them it's okay to stay in their sin. This is exactly what took place in the history of Israel, and it's exactly what is taking place now in the Christian church. The Word of God says judgment begins with the household of God, first to the Jew, then to the Gentile. And in the same way, we're reading about it happening to the Jews. We're watching it happen with our eyes to the Gentiles. There's this culmination with King Omri in chapter 16, verse 23, and how Omri went and bought a place from a man named Shimir, and he named the place Samaria. And Samaria became the new name for the nation of Israel. They had their own religion. They had their own priests. They had their own way of doing things. And they have gotten to this place of utter depravity. So much so that when Ahab becomes king, he marries a Sidonian princess named Jezebel. And she's the most wicked woman to sit on a throne in Israel. And in the coming days, we'll be reading about the judgment of God being poured out on those people who chose to align themselves with this idolatry. It's important for us to see that these people weren't choosing originally to go off and worship a false god. No, what they did was say, I don't like the way you're worshiping God, or I don't like where you're worshiping God, so we're going to go and worship God in our own way. They began redefining God. They were not consciously turning away from Yahweh, but they were consciously redefining Him. And in so doing, worshiping false gods. They made a form of God. And it's the exact same thing that's happening in the church today when we say, oh, our God doesn't judge this particular sin, whether it be a sexual preference or whatever it is. And so this northern nation of Israel, the 10 tribes, have now become Samaria. They are still the people of God, but God has now handed them over to their own depravity and allowed them even to be known by a new name. And such a division has arisen then that Jews and Samaritans don't even associate with one another. They don't view themselves as brothers any longer. Such is the fate of the northern kingdom, and it will happen to the church today as well when the people of God redefine what it is to walk with God. They say the God today is not the same God of the Old Testament, as if God could or would change. And we are beginning to see the judgment of God being poured out on the institution of religion that claims Christianity but denies the God who founded it. On the other hand, in today's reading, we also see in 2 Chronicles chapter 17, Jehoshaphat, who is blessed because he walks in the principles of God. He loves God, serves God, he teaches the people about God, and he's abundantly blessed. We each have a choice to make. Will we be like the household of Jeroboam and those who are fighting amongst themselves, killing each other, and being judged by God because of their wickedness, their depravity, and their idol worship? Or will we choose to be the faithful, like Jehoshaphat, who goes back to the roots? He finds the truth and teaches it to other people, and he is blessed because of it. The difference is humility. Jehoshaphat submitted himself to the word of God. The people of Samaria defined God through their own lens and suffered the consequences. God bless you, my friends. May he grant you and me humility, that we would walk in all of his ways, that we would be focused on giving him the honor that is due his holy name. We'll see you tomorrow.